We will begin with opening statements by Ms. Higgins, followed in alphabetical order. Thank you.
Good evening. I do want to thank the League of Women Voters, the college, and all others who helped organize this fine event this evening. And thanks to all of you who came out. I am a passionate Democratic woman trying to do my part to make the world a better place for everyone. I'm from Mendon Township, St. Joseph County, where I was also raised on a farm, the oldest of 8 children. We all worked hard to help our family succeed. I was married and became a mother at 17. That baby that I chose to keep is now in her 40s. She's the oldest of 6 birth and stepchildren that I claim, along with my husband Larry. We also are blessed with 8 grandchildren, and I am fortunate that I can still share life with both of my parents. I have a wide variety of experience, education, and problem-solving skills that make me uniquely qualified to see many sides of an issue and consider future effects of legislation. I earned bachelor's and master's degrees in education. I've received training in nursing and tax preparation. I have been a stay-at-home mom, a working mom. I have been an active farm partner and an active environmentalist. I was a full-time Marcellus public school teacher, coach, contract negotiator with benefits, and most recently a part-time, privatized substitute teacher with no benefits. I have small business experience as the owner and manager of a bed and breakfast, and I've held numerous other part-time jobs and volunteer positions. I am currently the chair of the St. Joseph County Conservation District Board of Directors and volunteer many hours to provide programs to protect our natural resources. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Miller.
Thank you, and good evening to everybody. I, like Carol, would like to thank the college for hosting. I'd like to thank the League of Women Voters for also hosting and putting together this forum. It's important that everybody know what their candidates stand for, and it's important that there's a forum, a venue, to give people that chance to hear what the candidates have to say. 2 years ago, I ran on a campaign of getting back to the people, of emphasizing service to the people. I gave out my cell number during the campaign. I attended plenty of events, of course. I attended lots of local government meetings. Most importantly, I visited people in their homes where they are at. I stayed late at events to, most importantly, really listen to people. And just this morning we had a legislative update in Berrien Springs, out of district, but it was the regional educational update. And I was the last one in the room. In fact, that happens a lot. I'm a lot of times the last one in the room because I want to stay to listen. And in this particular instance this morning, a woman from Benton Harbor Schools wanted to stay, and she wanted to talk to somebody about their problem in Benton Harbor. I stayed and listened to her because I care. I can relate to her as a former teacher. I listen to people. Those promises, what I ran on 2 years ago, getting back to the people, I've come through on those promises. I've followed up, and I've shown you that you can trust me these past 2 years. What's going on in Lansing? Well, in Lansing, I read every bill. Every non-appropriations bill that comes before me, I've already read it. I'm one of 2 legislators that I know of who does that. That means you can trust, while you're living here at home, that I've done my homework. You don't have to worry about what's going on in the State House. I already know what's coming. That should be expected, and that's what I believe is expected from your legislator. That's why I do it. I don't take lobbyist money because I believe that's the right thing to do. And I believe I can continue serving you. Thank you.
Okay. The first question addresses education, so we're in good shape with a couple of teachers here. We all know that good teachers are a key to good education. But how do we attract good teachers to a profession when many current teachers are having their pay cut, insurance premiums increased, and pension plans diminished or eliminated? How do we find enough great teachers to teach in all our schools, including our tougher schools, under those conditions? And Ms. Higgins, would you go first on that? We will.
You summed up the problem in your question, I think, because teachers are under attack from many different directions. It's very difficult to be in the classroom today. The expectations have gone up, and the joy of teaching in some ways has been diminished because they can't, their ability to teach is dependent on student test scores and things that should not be part of the curriculum. How do we attract them? We attract them by making the teaching profession something that is just as well respected as the military. We thank them for what they do. We tell them how much we appreciate what they do, and we pay them as professionals. That is a key ingredient to attracting anyone to any profession. And that is not what we're seeing in our current financial issue with schools. They have lost 3% for several years that they had to put into an account for their health care. That has it's been appealed 3 times, I believe, by the governor. There's a lot of dissatisfaction over that. Teachers have also been expected to do more and more with less and less time. In order to get those people with the talents there, and oftentimes we do, part of the problem is they only last a year, a 2, less than 5. I believe half of our teachers leave the profession within the first 5 years of teaching. So we really need to structure our pay scale and the way that we treat teachers so that they feel appreciated.
Thank you. Mr. Miller.
We just had this question this morning in our educational update, and it's an important question because teachers are the front line in our kids getting raised. I should say parents are the front line, but as far as their academic education, teachers are the front line. They are often the difference makers in what happens in a kid's life. Oftentimes, if a child's parents don't believe in a particular child, oftentimes it's a teacher who is the first person to stand up and believe into that kid, to build encouragement into that kid. And that is important. And there is no one correct answer to how do we attract good teachers. I think pay is definitely a part of it. And to that point, over the last 6 years, we have increased funding to education. We are paying out of the school aid fund into education the highest we've ever done. Now, what is behind every statement on what is going into education is our funding formula. And the fact is, our funding formula is put forward by the Constitution, by Proposal A from back in 1994. We should probably take a look at Prop A from 1994 because it's from 1994. And if we need a different funding structure, that obviously would have to go through the voters of the state of Michigan, at least, if not 2/3 of the legislature as well. If that's a discussion we need to have, I'm certainly more than willing to take a look at that discussion. I know for me personally as a teacher, I left where I was teaching in Michigan to go back to Indiana. I took a pay cut. I also took a longer drive to work. And I took that all for the promise of more sanity. In Indiana, at our school, we simply had better discipline. It was a better environment for me to teach in, and I could come and go to work more comfortably. So it's no one answer.
Okay, thank you.
Can I rebut?
For rebuttal.
Thank you. Though it is true that for the last few years, the per pupil amount that the state has been given to our districts has gone up, much of the problem has been that a great portion of that has been spent on retirement. Schools' responsibilities for retirement has increased, where it used to be 12-15% of the retirement. It's now to 35%, but then they gave us money so that the schools could pull it out of that extra money. The amount that schools actually have to help teachers, to help students, has not increased significantly. In fact, it's only a few dollars above where it was in 2008 before the big, well, it wasn't 2008, 2011 I believe was when Engler cut $460 per, I'm getting the wrong governor. I'm sorry, Governor Snyder cut $460 per student. Thank you.
Mr. Miller will go first on the next questions. Let's address the economy. What do you think will generate more jobs in Michigan, given that every state is trying to make itself more attractive to employers? Do you have any direct experience with job creation?
This is a catchphrase that I employ all the time, and it's very simple. Government needs to get out of the way. Government does not create jobs. It's important to understand that. We don't sit up in Lansing and create jobs, and anyone who thinks that's the way it works is kidding around with themselves. Government does not create jobs. People create jobs, and that's the important thing to remember. It's important to allow those individuals, in this case the state of Michigan, all 10 million people, almost 10 million, hopefully it'll get over that. It's important to allow them the avenue to create those jobs and make sure that we are not impeding their progress in an unreasonable way. One example I can think of is a bill we just passed out of the House recently, weeks ago, saying for small construction projects, how about we not put licensure requirements on someone doing handiwork in a home, a neighbor's home down the street. We raised the limit to $4,000. You know what, if you're doing handiwork under $4,000, let's not put those requirements. Let's make it easier and cheaper on the person doing the work and the person paying for the work. Let's make it easier and cheaper on them to do that work. These are grandmas and grandpas we're talking about. This is a good thing. This is government getting out of the way, government stepping back and saying, you know what, this is unreasonable. So that's just one example, but to create jobs, it takes the environment that can produce job makers. That's businesses, that's people. And lastly, do I have any experience with job creation? As a teacher and as a 29-year-old, the answer is a probably short no, given that I have 10 seconds.
Mrs. Higgins.
There are a lot of jobs right now in St. Joseph County and probably Cass County that are actually unfilled. There are many open positions. I've been told on several occasions that people will come in, apply for those jobs, and 1 or 2 days later they're off, they're done, they've resigned. I want to know what we're doing wrong that we're not keeping people in jobs that are there. I believe a big part of the problem is that we're not paying a living wage, and people can't afford to support their family on what they're being offered. I believe that all types of work are worthy of a living wage, and any family who's out there working a 40-hour week to support their children deserves enough to pay their bills. I believe what policy should do at our state level is help small businesses overcome that hurdle between what they can afford to pay their workers and what their workers need to be able to survive as a living wage. I believe that government can facilitate new jobs. The renewable energy sector has huge potential for new, quality, good paying jobs that won't disappear. They will stay in Michigan because we need that energy here and we'll use it here. I believe that we could have food hubs established throughout the state where local producers bring their food together. We establish new processing plants so that we can feed our own state residents instead of importing as much from out of state. These are policies that government can help put into place.
Thank you. Mr. Miller asked for a 1-minute rebuttal.
I've spent the last year and 3/4 too asking employers, why the shortage? Why can't you get people to work? What's the problem? That's what I ask them. And by and large, the answer I get is very simple. They say, Aaron, we need someone to show up to work who wants to work and who is drug-free. And mostly, we need someone who's educated to fill the job. We don't have people for our skilled trades. Those answers I get ad nauseum all the time. It's not about mandating our employers to pay more. It's about, can we look at educating our people correctly to fill those jobs which exist out there and where they can get a living wage.
Thank you. Mrs. Higgins will go first on the next question, which addresses transportation. Do you believe Michigan's current level of funding is adequate to maintain our aging roads and bridges? If not, what should be done to increase funding for those purposes?
The first part of the question, is it adequate? Apparently not. Most road commissions, most places I go, bus drivers, people that drive on our roads believe that they are not in adequate shape, and things like bridges, which we have so many in Michigan, are very, very expensive to replace, and it takes quite a bit of forethought to put into a budget enough money to make those bridges safe and sound. But how do we come up with funding to make those roads and our infrastructure safe and adequate so that business will want to settle here, so that school buses are traveling on safe roads, and all of the things that we want to avoid, hitting potholes and paying extra to keep our car in decent shape? I think that there are several things that we could do to generate some funds. One, why don't we ask the people who are on our roads with big equipment, our farmers, to pay diesel tax on a portion of their farm fuel? They use our roads tax-free. I am a farm daughter and I have siblings who farm, but I also know that much of what our county road commissions do is to keep roads wide enough for farm equipment. I also think that another source of revenue would be a tax on tickets to college and professional sporting events and entertainment. A 6% tax because people drive to those places, because it's not affecting the poor, it's discretionary money that is spent on those items. That would be a source for us to get revenue for our roads.
Thank you. Mr. Miller.
Is there adequate funding for roads, and if not, what do we do? This was our same question in our forum 2 years ago, and since then we have, I hate to use the phrase taken care of because the package didn't look the way I wanted, but we have addressed this, at least it's safe to say that, in the legislature since that time. Is there adequate funding? We're going to have to wait until this package starts taking effect. Unfortunately, most of the supporters of the roads package from almost exactly a year ago wanted this to take effect in stages. And I heard from road engineers, road builders, private companies, MDOT. I heard that they can't handle this volume of money because they don't have the people, they don't have the equipment to do it right away. And I thought, that's an okay answer, but in a way we're also putting off the problem, and we're saying to the people of the state of Michigan, we think this is a good idea, but not good enough to implement it right away. And so I was not a fan of that, but we're going to have to take a look at the next 4 years till fiscal year 2021 when this takes effect. We're going to have to ask that question, has this package produced enough money? And obviously up till that package, the answer was no. To me, it's important to make roads funded from as correlative a funding structure as possible. That means whoever's using the road, they should pay for the road. That is pretty straightforward and simple. And the most correlative method to pay for it at this point is the gas tax. I don't think the answer is taxing entertainment, taxing professional sporting events. We should make the tax come from where it makes the most sense. And the common sense answer for that is the gas tax. That's the simple answer.
Mr. Miller will go first on the next question. And this is addressing voting in elections. In many elections, particularly at the local level, including school board elections, bond issues and the like, turnout at the polls is very low, sometimes as low as 10%. Do you think voter apathy is a problem in Cass County? If so, what steps, if any, do you think should be taken to address that problem?
The tough thing is voting is a freedom and not a forced act, and how you address getting more people to the polls is a tough question because it is also someone's freedom to stay home. I'm not in support of that. I take pride in voting in every election. I actually enjoy voting. I sit there and fill in all the bubbles because I enjoy it, and I'm the last one to walk out. My wife's waiting for me at the door because I enjoy it so much. How do we get people to enjoy it like I do, or like hopefully you do in this room? That's the million-dollar question. How do we get rid of voter apathy? I think the answer is simply education, and that looks like many different forms. I try myself. I try and educate people. You've probably seen them yourself. I try and put on Facebook whenever I can, and an email reminding people verbally, hey, the last day to register is, oh, by the way, tomorrow, October 11th for this November election. It's important to verbally, any way possible, remind people, hey, your life, so much of your life at least, depends on what you do at the polls. And hey, that's coming up here. Are you registered? No? Why not? My brother turned 18 a year and a half ago. My sister-in-law turned 18 this year on my birthday. We share birthdays. And the first thing we did together after her birthday was I took her in to register to vote. It's important to educate, especially our young people, because most everybody is registered. If you check the Secretary of State website, you can check right now, it's over 7 million. Most people are registered. We need to teach our young people who are coming into the ranks of voting, we need to teach them the importance of voting and why it's important. That will give them the intrinsic motivation of getting to the polls and voting, because hopefully they will care. And I know I'll be doing my part with my children. I'll be educating them firsthand. They're going to be with me in the polling booth. They're going to be watching me over the next 18 years.
Thank you. Mrs. Higgins.
Do I think there's voter apathy in Cass County and St. Joseph County? I will add, absolutely. But it's not just apathy, it's disgust. We have a funding situation for campaign finance that is out of control. Far too much money is spent. This position pays under $72,000 per year, and there will be races across this state who will spend twice that or 3 times that to get elected. We need to have some limits. We need to make sure that one person gets one vote, because the way it is now, where we accept money from political action committees that get money from huge corporations that have unlimited spending amounts that they can put into an election, makes our young people think that their vote doesn't matter. That's not right. We need to bring back some sanity to our elections. We need to bring back a limit on how much can be spent per person, per corporation, and then we can talk about encouraging people to vote. I believe people will care. I believe they want to be a participant in our democracy. I also think we should consider a couple of things that are being tried in other states. For example, out west I'm not sure if it's Washington, Oregon, but they have sent ballots. They send ballots to every registered voter. They mail it in. That is how they're doing their election. Would we get a better response that way? People would certainly have a little more time to look over their ballot and consider their options. So those are some of the things I would like to see change.
Mr. Miller's asked for a minute of rebuttal.
To Carol's last point, I would agree. We do have mail-in voting, though. It's through absentee voting, and I voted to expand absentee voting to no reason. I voted for that. I imagine even my opponents in the room would agree with that. That expands voting rights, and that takes it from, hey, I'm going to be out of town on election day. That takes it to an honest system where you don't have to come and say why you're going to be out of town. You don't have to say that you're going to be out of town. You just come and say, you know what, I want to vote absentee this year. You get your ballot a month ahead of time, and you do get that time to vote. You can vote over 18 days if you want to with the ballot lying on your kitchen counter. I get this a lot. Corporation money in Michigan politics. And while I don't know what goes on at the federal level, it's very clear in Michigan law and the Secretary of State's website, you can read it for yourself, corporations can't donate. A lot of people say we need to get rid of corporate donations in Michigan. It's already done. It's already done.
Thank you. Mrs. Higgins will go first on the next question, which deals with the area of energy. Should Michigan allow construction of pipelines within the state to transport oil or natural gas produced elsewhere? Why or why not?
Fossil fuels can be transported many different ways. We can use a semi, we can use trains, we can use pipelines. I think, based on what I have researched, that the safest method is pipelines. That does not mean that I'm fond of pipelines. I think that if Jimmy Carter and his move towards renewable energy had succeeded into the Reagan administration, we could just be forgetting about pipelines right now, because renewable energy would be the way that the majority of our energy was being produced. In the meantime, I live a mile from the Enbridge pipeline that was replaced a few years ago because of the terrible break and oil spill in the Battle Creek area. If we are going to have pipelines, we have got to make sure they are adequately inspected on a regular basis, and that there is no possibility of companies not protecting that service that they provide. Until we can wean ourselves of fossil fuels, which we must do because of climate change and the things that we have to deal with in the future, 97% of climate scientists around the world know that that is happening. And so that is the way we must go. But until then, let's make sure our pipelines are safe. The one that I'm most concerned about is the one that goes through the Straits of Mackinac. It should be stopped, it should be closed, it should be reconstructed or changed its route in some way or in shape or form, because it is not safe in the condition it is right now.
Mr. Miller?
There's a reason that people arrive at the decision that pipelines are the answer, and it's because if we did look at another feasible way, and yes, we've got transit, we've got the Canadian National Line that runs through Cassopolis, of course, we've got Amtrak here, but you know, as far as carrying natural gas or crude or refined oil, pipelines are the answer, and we have multiple pipelines here in our district in the 2 counties. And for right now, the answer is a pipeline because of cost. And to Carol's point about safety, I would agree. We need to make sure that everybody remembers Enbridge in the Battle Creek area, just east of Battle Creek. everybody remembers that accident because it hit close to home. We have that same pipeline running through. What if it was my river? What if it was my creek? There needs to be oversight on those companies. There needs to be oversight on the pipeline. And if any of you frequent township meetings, you've seen Enbridge show up and explain exactly what they're doing. There's a reason they come out to those townships. They want to cover that information and they want to tell what they're doing. And in Enbridge's case specifically, I think it's important that they paid for their mess. And we're just now arriving at that point where we're at the end, we're at the final cleanup phase, but it's still going on after years. It's important that they pay their fair share and pay for the damage they created. The same thing happened down in the Gulf of Mexico with BP. They're paying for their damage, and that's important. But as far as pipelines go, until we find a better answer, that's the answer for now. We just better make sure it works for our safety and for the people of the state of Michigan and the nation.
Thank you. Mrs. Higgins, did you vote on that? Okay, thank you. We do. That was the last of the prepared questions. And I'm going to take these in the order that they were handed to me. The recent House bill addressing third graders' ability to read on grade level has many requirements for local districts to address deficits. These requirements are costly. How are districts supposed to address this expense? And Mr. Miller, you go first on that question.
By expense, were you referring to the deficit?
How are districts to, I'm going to...
Go ahead and read the question again, please.
The recent House bill addressing third graders' ability to read on grade level has many requirements for districts to address deficits. I think that's deficiencies in reading level. These requirements are costly for the school districts, and I think that the question is what provision is there for the school districts to meet those expenses?
We just passed a third grade reading bill to bring people up to speed. It did get watered down and had a lot put in that wasn't in before, and I think it was made better. And so I voted for it. If a school is not answering the questions of are we taking care of our kids' deficits now before the bill passed, and it's not law yet, or sorry, it is law now just recently, but if they're not already answering that question of how do we take care of reading deficits for our second graders who can't read, something's wrong. They should already be doing that. And these additional things should already be at least part of, if not a whole part of their program to educate first, second, third, I don't care what grade they're in, to educate anybody to read. That's our job as a school. The simple fact is some kids don't come to school having already learned to read. They're not your all-star student. In fact, some kids came from somewhere where reading was the bottom of the totem pole. It exists. It's hard to point blame at all. The thing to do, though, is your best that you can with each individual child. If someone comes in 5 and 6 years old and they can't read, we need to do our best to educate them to read. If that takes added time, if it takes programs that involve the parents and say, hey, we're going to work on reading at home too, we need to have a whatever it takes approach to helping kids learn to read, because if they don't learn to read, how are they going to go on to the next stepping stones of their life? You don't. You don't if you can't read. That is a crucial building block to the rest of the stepping stones. So I think it takes a whatever it takes approach. That's what this bill says. And retention is just a small piece of that puzzle.
I taught fourth grade for quite some time, self-contained, and reading was one of my subjects. One of the things that a lot of people don't understand about reading is that there are several pieces to it that students have to move through. My fourth graders, with very, very few exceptions, could pick up a book and read the words. They could probably tell me what they read. The problem was many of them could not sit down with a paper and pencil and answer questions about what they read. That was one of their biggest reading weaknesses. I do not want to get in a situation where we are retaining students who can't do well on a multiple choice test. We're already doing everything we possibly can. The whatever it takes is being done. Teachers have been keeping kids in from recess, keeping them away from music class, giving them every moment of extra support they can to try to help them move to that next level so they can be successful on a state mandatory test. What we're not doing, and what I supported years ago, was a program such as Reading Recovery. Reading Recovery requires some very specially trained teachers. You don't get it in your regular college curriculum, and it costs money to get that training. Then it requires that you only work with 1 or 2 students at a time, but very intensely. Research has shown that that is how you help those kids read. This program was successful in Australia. It's come to this country. I have a good friend in Kalamazoo who is trained and using it in Kalamazoo public schools. But we don't have the funding to do it in our other schools.
Thank you. Mr. Miller asked for a minute rebuttal.
I'd like to tell a brief story of how retention did work. Unarguably, undoubtedly. I have 2 young adopted sisters. They're 12 and 9 years old, soon to be 10 years old. Ellie's about to have her birthday. People are often surprised that I have sisters that age, but my parents did their part. They took the opportunity to say, okay, right here in our own community, we've got to help do our part. They ended up deciding to adopt 2 girls. The oldest was in utero when her mother was doing drugs, unfortunately. Zoe experienced so many academic problems due to that, and she repeated 3rd grade. And I think if you'd ask her today, and she's in 5th grade, I think if you'd ask her today, Zoe, what do you think about repeating 3rd grade? I don't think she would remember. What she does know is that she is successful now. And that's only a part of it. But Zoe is doing well, now she's thriving, and retention was just a small part of it, and now she can read.
Can I answer?
Only one rebuttal.
I mean, I didn't get a rebuttal, but.
Well, we only allow rebuttal
Okay.
for the person who went first. Okay. Ms. Higgins, you will go first on the next question, though. Cass County is regarded as one of the strictest county when it comes to drug law enforcement. Would you make attempts to ease drug laws or make them more harsh? Possibly consider legalizing drugs such as marijuana?
I know that it sounds really popular to say that you want to be tough on crime. I want to be tough on preventing people from the situations that lead them into crime. And I also want to look at the research and respond in a way that research says is the most beneficial when people break the law. If it's a law concerning possession or use of a drug such as marijuana, the research shows we are, or even meth or some of the other drugs that are out there, the research shows that we would be better off to rehabilitate, to give them the therapy and programs they need to get off of the drug, get off of the addiction, keep them with their family as much as possible, keep them on the job as much as possible, prevent them from being a burden on our taxes, and they are much less likely when they go through those programs to end up back in prison down the road. I believe we need a lot of emphasis on looking at those options instead of an automatic, you're in jail, bad, bad, bad. Because that's not helping our society. At the state level, I think it is a matter of time before marijuana becomes legal. I have changed my position a lot on this. As a teenager and young adult, I thought it was a bad thing. But now I am aware of the research that says if you put these three, line them up, alcohol, cigarettes, and marijuana, the least harmful is marijuana, and it's the only one that's illegal.
Mr. Miller.
Everybody in this room knows that Cass and St. Joseph counties have a huge drug problem. And we've been struggling for a long time to talk about what the correct answer is for that. To address the question of marijuana legalization right away, I'll come out and say, no, I don't think it's the right thing to do. I think what you'll see is you'll see that gateway drug only expand. You'll only see the drug problem get worse. And then where do you stop? And then where do you stop on down the line? Do we legalize meth? Anyone who's dealt with meth can say an emphatic no. It does take looking at a whatever it takes approach for someone who gets arrested for meth. Imprisonment is not the answer. They need treatment. And I've worked with our undersheriffs, I've worked with other law enforcement and our mental health coordinators, Kathy Emmons and Liz Odell, over the last 2 years on what that answer is, what that needs to look like. Some people need treatment, other people need a forced detox. There's no correct answer in each case, but I don't think legalizing marijuana is the answer. I think the answer is taking a look at if a person has a problem, what do they need the most? And let's address that problem. Let's address it in the way that fits that individual.
I would like to make a couple comments. In our country, we have many veterans suffering from PTSD. And more of them are finding relief from their symptoms by using medical marijuana. We have children with epilepsy finding relief from their symptoms by using medical marijuana. We have many other health issues that are benefiting people by using medical marijuana. It is time we catch up with the research and quit blaming it as a gateway drug. It's most likely not, but it's used in combination with alcohol, which is probably the easiest drug to get your hands on. So let's make sure we are basing our decisions on research. The big thing we need to do with marijuana is really understand what level of it in our body is a level that causes us to be high. That hasn't been done.
Thank you. Mr. Miller will go first on this question. Please explain your position on a bill currently being discussed in the House which would allow Michigan residents to carry concealed weapons without a permit. How does this improve the safety of our citizens?
I co-sponsor the bill, so I support it. This takes a look at what the Second Amendment says. We just heard our judge candidates talk about what the Constitution says. We should stand up for the rule of law. Let's do what the law says. We all heard it. We should stand up for what the Second Amendment says. And I support the Second Amendment on this one.
I do not think that prohibiting concealed weapons without a permit takes away the right to own a gun. I do believe that it is important that anyone who carries a gun in certain places have the permission to do that, to show that they are qualified and have the state of mind to be appropriately using it. I do not support the concealed weapons without a permit. And furthermore, I agree with 80% of Americans who now think we need to have universal background checks, who now believe that it would be wise for us to prohibit assault weapons. We can own guns, we can protect ourselves without going to war and using weapons of war. It is time for us to be smart. If we save one life by making sure these background checks or assault weapons are no longer so easy to come by, to me that is worth a lot. And I support hunting rights, I support your right to own a gun, but I do not think as a society we need to arm ourselves to the point where at the slightest moment of anger, someone loses their, it's road rage, or it's just that moment with a spouse where all of a sudden there's a murder-suicide because that gun was so easy to come by, and maybe some mental health problems would have prevented it being in the home. So I feel very strongly about this issue, and I've talked to constituents who are very concerned about it and want this to be something that we change.
Thank you. Mr. Miller asked for a rebuttal.
Well, to be clear, it's that way already. We do have a concealed permit process. And to the point about road rage, dealing with a problem with a spouse, a permit card is not going to guarantee those problems don't come up. So if you think a permit card is your savior for gun protection, it's not going to do it. I like facts, and I've brought this up to many people via email, and not many people here in Michigan know that the state of Vermont in New England has never required a permit to carry a weapon. They've never done it. They are a permit-free state. And if you check their crime stats, which I did, they're the second lowest in the nation. And I encourage you to check Chicago, where they have the toughest gun laws, and you'll see a very stark difference.
I guess I'm going to ask a little of the people here. We have several questions from the audience that have not been asked. And our time is nearly up, so shall I continue to ask?
Yes.
We'll take a couple more then. The state of Michigan will face in the near future an energy shortage due to the closing of coal-fired power plants. Renewable sources such as wind and solar sources are not ample to make up for the shortfall. What can be done to make up the shortfall of energy in this state? Mr. Miller, you go first on this one.
Well, I think the first answer is to fight as much as possible the regulations coming down from the feds that are putting this into place. If you don't know about it, coal plants fire most of our electricity in this state. And we are being told by the federal government that's got to stop, and it's got to stop very quickly. We never left the Stone Age for lack of stone. We graduated onto iron because we found a better way. Right now, coal plants are the answer, and if you disagree, please turn off the lights in your house first. Coal plants are the answer because that's what's there, that's what's available, that's the best way right now. So we need to take a look at fighting that first, into graduating into better methods on a longer term, over many more years than just a couple of years. So that's the first part to my answer. The second part, though, is taking a look at what answers are better. What is better than coal? And yeah, renewables are part of it, but they're so expensive right now, and the biggest part is they're unreliable. We can't keep our grid up with wind because the wind doesn't always blow. Maybe in northern Germany it does quite a bit, and it does blow very hard. In northern Germany, with the number of windmills they have, they're able to put forth a good deal of electricity. But how do you back that up? And right here in our Senate district, we have the Cook Nuclear Power Plant. If nuclear is done right, it can be part of the answer. But it takes a broad-based approach, looking at all kinds of different methods to put together a diverse energy portfolio. That way we're not relying on any one energy source. It takes many things into that puzzle to put our energy forward in Michigan.
The very best thing we can do to make our energy last longer is energy conservation. We have a huge potential everywhere in this country and in Michigan to improve the efficiency of our appliances, our furnaces, our air conditioners, our windows. I can't remember the statistics because I don't memorize numbers well, but the numbers are impressive. How much energy we could save if we made energy conservation a priority. And here again, the state can help. And it has done some. We've got the energy prioritization, optimization programs with our utilities. We need to continue that. We need to make it easier for low-income people to make those improvements to their homes, to buy more efficient automobiles and so on. Coal. It's dirty. Even clean coal is dirty. There are places in Detroit where people have asthma, where people have lung problems because they live so close to coal-fired power plants and other industry. Mercury. Our fish, we can't eat them every day because of the fallout from the combustion of things like coal and other fossil fuels that get into our lakes and our fish. We do have the potential to become much more reliant on renewable energy. The Great Lakes have a great amount of wind. Germany is not alone. There are places throughout this country where wind farms are benefiting farmers and other landowners who get a regular income, which would really help right now because $3 corn is not going to make it very far.
A number of the questions were addressed to one candidate or the other, and I guess I'm going to skip ahead of some of those and let you talk with them afterwards individually about their position. As one final question, and then we'll ask them to wrap up. Do you believe there should be auto insurance reform in Michigan? If so, how would you go about achieving it? I think that's yours.
Auto insurance, we all get our bill, whatever, quarterly, every 6 months. Ours just came, we pay it yearly, and it does go up, and we all are frustrated knowing that our no-fault law seems to make us have the most expensive insurance in the country. Certainly, there must be something we can do to bring it down and still have adequate coverage. My understanding is, and I'm not an expert, but my understanding is that much of the problem has to do with the unlimited coverage on medical costs that our no-fault guarantees to pay. And so our hospitals and other providers know that they can charge twice as much as they might a person who just comes in off the street for a similar accident through an insurance company, because it's guaranteed that it'll pay whatever the cost is. That's my understanding. So I believe we need a cap. I believe we need to limit how much we will pay when a person has an injury from a car accident, or we need to guarantee somehow that the same charge is being applied regardless of where the source of the income will will be, whether it's from auto insurance or your regular medical insurance. So yes, I think that auto insurance reform is something that can be addressed. I know Aaron feels the same. It's one of his top priorities on the cards that I've gotten, so.
I don't need to say anything. I agree. There are a number of things that need to be done with our no-fault laws, and I'm very passionate about this because this affects us here in Southwest Michigan to an exponential degree. Indiana's right across the border. We just had our 10-year reunion. I dated myself a little bit. We just had our 10-year reunion, and I was ashamed to see how many of my classmates were living in Indiana. I am a proud Michigander, born and raised. I love Michigan. But I can't blame them when they say, Aaron, the primary reason was I just moved down to Howe. I just moved down to wherever you fill in the blank, Granger, Elkhart, LaGrange. I just moved across the border because I couldn't pay any more for auto insurance. It was just too much. I'm paying less than half of what I was in Michigan. Something's wrong then. You'd be hard pressed to explain that auto no-fault had nothing to do with Michigan being the only state to lose population from the 2000 census to the 2010 census. You can't explain that. That's a part of it. That is a part of it. The cost to live in Michigan is huge, and we could talk for hours about this, but we can't really because we're limited. The two-bill package that we had last year, which most Republicans supported, a few were opposed, and they were really doing the stopping, and not a single Democrat was in favor of. It put a limit on just attendant care. I'll just highlight this one. It said attendant care is limited at $15 an hour, still 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. Because I'm a math teacher, you can do that very quickly. 15 times 24 times 365 is $131,400. It put the limit at that, and people lost their minds because we were capping care. Something's wrong with our system.
Thank you. That will conclude the time we've allowed for questioning. I'll ask each of the candidates to give 2 minutes of closing remarks, and Mr. Muller will begin.
I wrote down too many remarks, so I'll finish my beginning remarks now. That just will work the best. Over the last 2 years, I've demonstrated to anybody who cares to know, anybody who cares to ask, anybody who wants to know what their government is doing for them, what their representative is doing for them, I have demonstrated that I work very hard to make sure that you can trust me. I'm a very open individual, and I make sure that if there's a need to get a problem across, to communicate some problem with state government, you want a law that needs to be passed. We have dealt with everything from the VA, which is federal, down to the local courts, which I have no control over, thank goodness. Whatever it is, though, I'm willing to hear somebody out. I've made it out to farms in Cass County. I've talked to families in Baroque, Colon. I go to their homes because that shows I care. That shows a level of care that maybe you don't get with another legislator, but that's what I believe in. That's an honest relationship with an individual that shows them that, wow, I'm giving them my time. And oftentimes it's at a strange time of late evening. I make it so that I am serving the 93,000 people of this district well. Like I said, I make myself open. I just want to tell a quick story. I give out my cell number again. I will give it to anybody who wants it. A guy called me from Dowagiac just last week, and he wanted to talk about Donald Trump. I didn't want to talk about Donald Trump, but I said, sure, anything you want. I was sitting at my kitchen table doing emails. Let's talk about Donald Trump. Well, he was very upset about Donald Trump, and he said, you know what? I'm giving you my vote because you answered your cell phone, and nobody would ever do that. That's just a small level of demonstration of what I've done for the last 2 years.
Higgins.
I have some information on the back table, And my cell phone number is on the card, and you can call me anytime you want. But I also have my little tree signs back there that are environmentally friendly, I hope, that you can tie up and so on. It's just us to create justice. And it's everyone's responsibility to do their best to understand what has been happening in Michigan and then get out and vote. I'm hoping that you will vote for Democrats when you can, so that we can begin to reduce the hardships that have been placed on working families and retirees. Because over the last several years, we've been giving the best benefits to the wealthiest and have taken away from those that need the most, such as starting to tax retirement benefits and reducing the amount of earned income credit for low-income families. That income gap has not gotten smaller, it has gotten bigger. 22% of the residents of the 59th district live in poverty. So even though we have reduced unemployment significantly, even though we have jobs, we still have people who cannot get out of that poverty problem. And it seems that Republicans have done more to keep families there than to help them get out. So, I would like to see better environmental oversight, because I am not happy about the Flint water crisis that could have been prevented had we done a better job right from the start. I'm not happy with the issues that have led to Detroit public school failures, with the opening of unlimited numbers of charter schools where there are too many. There are so many other things I'd love to talk about, but my time is up and would be happy to stay after for a minute. Thank you very, very much.
Okay, thank you both. Remember the vote on November 8th. Encourage everybody registered to vote that you know to this district to vote.
I'm surprised you did this job.